Hello and welcome to Sick Notes. My name's Ed Hope, I'm a junior doctor in the UK, and in this video I'm going to be continuing my look at the medical science behind the MCU. This is actually the last video in all the phase 1 of the MCU. So if you want to see me check out the phase 2 films, then give this video a like and a comment and subscribe and let me know, and I'll be back with them if enough people think it's worth it. But before that, we have to cover the last two movies. That's Captain America, the first Avenger, and the Avengers.
What'd your father die of?
Mustard gas. He was in the 107th Infantry. I was hoping I could be assigned
Your
there.
mother?
She was a nurse in a TB ward. Got hit, couldn't shake it.
Love Captain America, man. Can definitely relate to it as a skinny nerd. And we can see how far he is away from who he becomes with, you know, his sort of build and also his list of diseases here. Now, I'm not going to go through all of them, but they actually tell a nice little story. So on the list, we see scarlet fever. Now, this is a reasonably common disease, particularly in kids and particularly in the 1930s and 40s. You may have even had it yourself. It's an infection from the bacteria Streptococcus pyogenes. If it just affects your throat, the so-called strep throat, then it's fairly harmless, but it can have systemic symptoms, which is when we call it scarlet fever. So the symptoms would be a fever and you'd turn a very scarlet colour, but it definitely needs antibiotics to treat it, which wouldn't have been readily available in the sort of 1930s when Steve Rogers was growing up. Antibiotics were invented by Alexander Fleming in 1928, so probably not for a good few years before they're in sort of widespread circulation. And what happens if it isn't treated? Well, it can turn into rheumatic fever. So what do we have next on the list? Rheumatic fever. So if we get a significant Streptococcus pyogenes infection, your immune system goes into overdrive trying to kill the bacteria and kill its toxins, and it ends up damaging your own body, particularly your joints, your kidneys, your heart, and even your brain. I still see people that have had rheumatic fever as a child with symptoms from it, so they may have heart valve problems from it. This is called rheumatic heart disease. So if we look on the list here, Steve has also got palpitations or pounding in his heart, so he may have, you know, some damage from the heart from the rheumatic heart disease, which in turn may explain some of his other diagnoses like heart trouble and being easily fatigable. So what a great job they've done in using the medical conditions to tell a bit of a story. It turns out though, you know, he's got asthma. That probably on its own would have been enough to exclude him from enlisting. Talking about enlisting, we see this brief shot of a doctor listening to lots of new recruits' hearts, probably listening for a heart murmur caused by either a hole in the heart or a problem with one of the heart valves, which again could have been caused by rheumatic fever. Again, this at the time would have been enough to exclude you from enlisting.
Good morning.
So we see Steve Rogers going in to have the operation to have the super soldier serum, is that correct, infused into him. And it looks very kind of retro sci-fi, doesn't it? But these early operating theatres would have looked a bit like this. And we use the term theatres because back in the day, they were theatres. There'd be kind of stalls and places for people to watch and look down on this operation that was happening.
We begin with a series of micro-injections into the subject's major muscle groups. The serum infusion will cause immediate cellular change.
Okay, so we hear a little bit about the kind of medical procedure which is about to happen. So they're going to inject some of this serum into the main muscle groups, and you can see they've done it on the pectorals, and also we can see some injections going into the biceps as well. And presumably what you don't see is them injecting it into the gluteus maximus, so the big muscle groups in the bottom. You know, that would give away how America's best ass is made.
And then, to stimulate growth, the subject will be saturated with vital rays.
Okay, vital rays, never heard of them. Presumably some kind of electromagnetic wave giving them energy. That's why they needed so much power. We use lots of rays in medicine, but never heard of these particular ones.
That wasn't so bad.
That was penicillin.
So as we mentioned earlier, he gets a shot of penicillin. It's been invented now. And we do sometimes give antibiotics prophylactically for certain operations that have like an increased risk of infection.
Mr. Stark?
Such a classic scene. Those Vita Rays really have done the trick. I feel like I need to sit up a bit straighter now. It's a pretty impressive transformation. It's even conditioned his hair. Those Vita Rays, they do wonders. So is that remotely possible? The short answer is no. To go from like a 90-pound man to a 240-pound man in a matter of seconds. I mean, the physics alone prevents it. All that mass and energy to build up the muscles has to come from somewhere. Normally it comes from us eating food and building up. Clearly that hasn't happened here. Physics does allow us to create matter from nothing in a sense, but it takes a lot of energy. In this case, something like a billion joules of energy, or 1,000,000 Hiroshima bombs to make Captain America. Now I know they plugged in the whole grid from New York, but that wouldn't come close to the energy. But putting that big issue to one side, biologically, what could be going on? The truth could lie in the super serum, because we have chemicals in our body that regulate our growth. So if we artificially take some of them, then we'd artificially grow the body. The most obvious one is anabolic steroids. So anabolic means building the body up. Clearly, these wouldn't work anywhere near the timescales we saw here, and I wouldn't recommend them either. They're illegal and they have horrible side effects all over the body, like mood changes, the so-called roid rage. They make you bald, they give you acne, they can cause erectile dysfunction and increase your risk of prostate cancer too. The super serum has also cured his underlying diseases and made him grow another sort of 10 inches, which there aren't chemicals in your body quite that potent. I mean, the nearest one is something like growth hormone, but you'd have to take that before you turned an adult, because once you reach an adult, the growth plates, so the areas of bone that allow you to grow, have already fused closed, so you won't be able to increase in your height much after adulthood. Bottom line is, I'm afraid we won't be making Captain America anytime soon.
Tomorrow shall take its place. Hail Hydra!
Okay, so this spy's just taken a suicide pill and died within a few seconds. They're probably using cyanide. In fact, we know because we find out later on in the film.
How about cyanide? Does that give you the rumbly tummy too?
Not a nice way to go, and I know to speed up the film, they've done it over a few seconds, but it would probably be several minutes of really excruciating symptoms. And these pills were apparently carried by agents in World War II, with the poison of choice being cyanide. In World War II, we saw hydrogen cyanide, Zyklone B, used in the mass extermination camps by the Nazis in the gas chambers as well. Inhaling cyanide will kill you much quicker because it very quickly gets into the cells of the lungs, stopping you breathing, stopping your body getting oxygen very quickly. The way cyanide works is it blocks the mitochondria, so the powerhouse of the cell, from using oxygen. The mitochondria are unable to be the powerhouse. They're unable to make energy, therefore your cells can't make energy, therefore you die very quickly.
One of those, do you?
You are deluded, Captain.
So we see the Red Skull here finally unveiled, although he may be called the Red Skull, but this is 100% not his skull. Let me show you. So firstly, his eyes should be outside the skull, in the orbit here, in the socket, rather than inside the cranium like we see here. And I'm not sure how he's doing his evil speeches, because all the muscles of facial expression and the muscles that move your jaw are overlaying the skull, and obviously we can't see them here. Also, if this was just a red skull with no skin over it, then he'd have a massive infection risk, because all the skin and soft tissues are very important in protecting our body from the outside world. So more accurately, he's not really a red skull, he's just lost his cartilage of his nose and his ears, he's lost a lot of soft tissue, and his skin's turned red. That's probably more of an accurate description, but it's not quite as pithy. So this is almost the last scene in the film. Captain America has just crashed into the ice. We know that he's found 70 years later at the beginning of the film, and it's probably not a spoiler at this point to say he survives from being frozen. But would this actually be possible? Well, if Captain America was a nematode, a kind of worm-type creature, then yes, he would be. So there was a pair of nematodes found that were 42,000 years old, frozen in ice, and when we thawed them out, they still began moving and eating again. The reason why is that freezing slowly reduces the metabolism of your cells and stops your proteins degrading. And we actually utilize this in medicine in a lot of different ways. For example, when we are transporting organs after transplantation, we keep them very cold to make sure we preserve them as much as possible. And you may have also heard of cryogenic freezing, so people having their brains frozen, hoping to be brought back to life in the future. So is it possible in humans? Well, the current answer is no, unfortunately. Our brain tissue is just far too delicate to survive the freezing and the thawing out process. But as we know, Captain America, he ain't no normal human. So if anyone was gonna survive the thawing out process and thrive afterwards, you know, it'd be someone who'd had these super serums. And the Phase 1 films are rounded off by Avengers Assemble. I remember at the time this movie blew my mind. There's not a lot of medical stuff in it. We do have this call back to the dangers of gamma radiation that created the Hulk, in this case coming from the Tesseract.
Throwing off interference, radiation, nothing harmful, low levels of gamma radiation.
That can be harmful.
And we hear again what we already knew about Tony's condition.
You know, I've got a cluster of shrapnel trying every second to crawl its way into my heart. This stops it.
But we do see a few interesting trauma-related things. Cool, so that's a good example of a potentially tertiary blast injury. You should know all about that now.
You want to find out?
So a penetrating injury to Agent Coulson from Loki with the scepter.
Sorry, boss. The god rabbited.
Just stay awake. Eyes on me.
Oh, I'm clocked out here.
Not an option.
The only thing I would say here is, why doesn't Nick Fury kind of do some kind of first aid? I'm sure he would be first aid trained at S.H.I.E.L.D. While Coulson is chatting, Fury should be trying to stop the bleeding, and when he loses consciousness, he should be checking for a pulse and breathing, and if there isn't any, should be starting CPR. The one good thing, however, is that Nick Fury has got help, because we see some medics arrive pretty pronto. So there you go, my thoughts on all the Phase 1 films from the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Been great revisiting them, and I'd also love to know your thoughts on any other kind of scientific stuff that you saw, or kind of theories, or even stuff that I've missed, which I'm sure there is loads. I've already started rewatching the Phase 2 films and picking out some scenes to talk about. So if you want to see that soon, then give this video a like and a comment and subscribe to the channel, and I'll see what I can do. A few thank yous for this whole series. Firstly, to my friend Callum. He's got a great YouTube channel, talks about geeky stuff, including Marvel stuff. He gave me some ideas for this video, so check his channel and some of his videos out. And also to some of my doctor friends, Dr. Jake, Dr. James, Dr. Tom. They helped me out as well, bouncing some ideas for this. And finally, thank you to you guys for watching. Yes, you're watching the very end of this video in the end of this first part of the series, so you must enjoy it, and I really appreciate it. You know, coming back from a tough shift and seeing such lovely comments, and you know, people having little discussions about medicine as well, it's it just blows me away, way beyond what I ever expected to happen. And so yeah, I'm just gonna keep going, keep having fun with it, and you are welcome to join me for the ride. So until next time, I'll see you soon.